Welcome to New Voices in AI, the series from AIhub, where we celebrate the voices of Masters and PhD students, early career researchers, and those with a new perspective on AI. I am Jo Daly, Engagement Manager for AIhub, and this week I am talking to Oumaima Hajri about all of the things that she is working on. Without any further ado, let's begin. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today and taking some time to talk to us for New Voices in AI. If you could just introduce yourself, who are you, where are you kind of working at the moment?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. My name is Oumaima Hajri. I'm from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, with Moroccan roots, very important detail. At the moment, I work as a researcher at Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences, and I focus mainly on research within the sphere of responsible AI. And at the same time, I'm also doing a Master of Studies at the University in Cambridge in AI Ethics and Society. And it's basically the first cohort of this degree. And it's a multidisciplinary degree that focuses on responsible and ethical AI from different disciplines and perspectives. So yeah, that's me.
Wow, so it's like brand new cohort, kind of doing
Yeah,
this
it is.
important work.
Yeah, very exciting.
Brilliant. And well, you kind of mentioned a little bit about your kind of general area. What kind of things are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm working at a project with media organizations here in the Netherlands, and they are willing to apply certain AI applications within the work that they do. And basically what we're doing is trying to help them to implement these applications in a ethical and responsible way. So we're trying to help them within the whole process, from like the idea generation until the application, specifically more from an ethical perspective. So even like the questions that you ask yourselves, to also generate some kind of awareness, because there is always this engineering perspective somehow, if we can make it, and it's we also have the right to make it, like when we're looking at jurisdiction, etc. Then engineers are very happy and they start like building these things. But I think another question which is important to ask is, like, do we need this, and is this the best solution for the problem that we have, or is there maybe another solution to this problem, or is maybe the problem inexistent, and are we trying to create this problem so that we can implement AI? So it's really interesting. It gets sometimes, it's sometimes really hard to convey the message. But yeah, and another project that I work on focuses more on the intersection between digitalization and the art sector. And basically, I'm trying to connect both worlds. So link like projects that work more from a art perspectives, with like ideas when it comes to AI opportunities, so that they can also have somehow of an impact in a positive way. And I'm also part of focus groups that are trying to understand how to give the intersection of gender and tech, but also responsible tech, a more prominent role in education curricula.
Oh wow, there's a lot of things going on. That's amazing. Yeah, definitely that question of just because we can, kind of should we?
Exactly.
Like also the mention about arts as well. I think so often we see art and science as these kind of very separate things. So to actually have something that brings them together, that's kind of brilliant. I mean, it sounds like you have loads of different kind of interests and areas in AI. How did you kind of get started? How did you get into AI?
Yeah, so that has been quite of a long journey. It started in 2016 with my undergrad in international relations. Somehow this sounds really cliche, but I really wanted to change the world. And I think that as a political scientist, you not only want to change the world for your own sake, but you also want to help others to understand society better so that it becomes a collective burden. So, you're like exposed to different viewpoints, experiences, cultures, which somehow gives you like a broader field of vision on the world. And as the world is becoming more globalized and interconnected, I felt like technology's role was becoming more and more evident. And it isn't only like helping this interconnectedness, but it's also widening widening certain gaps that are already existing within society. And in my last year of my undergrad, I went on an exchange in China, Beijing, and that is basically where my passion started to develop for the intersection between more human rights and technology, obviously, because there you're like subjected to oppression on this technological perspective. And yeah, I really wanted to understand this technical perspective as well. Like, okay, how does this algorithmic architecture work? What does this field mean? That's why I did my postgraduate degree in data science. So like focusing more on subjects such as machine learning, data mining, but also more, like focusing on things such as policymaking. So how do you try to convey difficult messages and technical messages to policymakers? It was really, how can I frame that? So it was quite a technical degree, obviously, but I also felt like they really delivered it in such a way, like, okay, data is the new gold. You guys are the data scientists, so you are going to rule the world. And it somehow like didn't focus on ethical perspectives or like, okay, obviously we have to like build models, we have to work with data, but what about bias? What about like, why are we even using these kind of models? Aren't there other solutions? The thing that I just mentioned at the beginning. So I dedicated my thesis to understand more about like the role of AI and its intersection with accountability. Obviously now with like the GDPR, but also with the new AI Act coming up. And that is when I realized that I really have to learn more about this field, more from an ethical perspective. That's why I started with this degree in AI ethics and society at Cambridge. So it has been quite, a long ride. But I'm really happy in the end.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like kind of starting with that kind of, well, it's interesting to hear you kind of say about with the data science degree, there kind of wasn't, by the sounds of it, much in the way of kind of focus on that ethical side. And it definitely seems like more and more, like with this creation of the course, it's definitely becoming like a really active area and really important area as well.
Yeah, obviously, like there was this ethics washing. So like we had like 2 courses of like 2 weeks talking about these ethical dilemmas. And obviously, like you talk about the famous trolley problem, and that's it, like, okay, we check the box. Ethics is done, and now we go further to like the data sets and the models, etc., which obviously makes sense for a data science degree. But at the same time, I feel like as a data scientist, you have such a great responsibility within contemporary society. So the least that one should expect is that you also have a profound knowledge of the ethical side and the potential negative impact it could have.
Absolutely, yeah. And as we kind of said, like with hopefully more people kind of taking these kind of ethical approaches, what do you think might be some of the biggest changes that we see in AI, I guess, in general, in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So I think maybe the more far-reaching and continuous mechanization of the worldview that we have. I feel like that worldview leads to the erosion of the distinction between what it means to be human and what it means to be a machine. So we're already talking about machine consciousness, machine morality, robot rights, which in my opinion is like, it doesn't make any sense, whilst there are still other people who don't even have basic human rights. It doesn't make sense to talk about robot rights. So that on the one hand, but on the other, I feel like this mechanization of this worldview, and there is this steady decline in what it actually means to be as a human. I feel like we're trying to approach everything as a machine, everything as an automata. And I really think that now, with specifically like things as the metaverse, but like also other developments within this field, that it's really going to get like, it's only going to get worse, I think. Yeah, I just can't imagine a world where I'm standing before, like in front of a judge, and a robot's standing next to me, and we're trying to. It's just, yeah. It may sound like something for in the far future, but I really think that it's near. It's going to be near.
Yeah, I think it is interesting that it's kind of these visions of the future with sort of very sophisticated robots kind of working alongside us. And I wonder if there's maybe a sense of almost like trying to rush towards that future before we're necessarily even the technology is ready for that, or never mind sort of people as well.
I mean, everyone wants to hop on that AI train somehow, but I feel like not everyone understands what AI is, what the potential impact can be, like the negative impact, but also why do we want to hop on that train? Like, obviously, it has a lot of opportunities. It makes certain things more efficient. It helps us as a society, but there are also other negative impacts that I feel like are being overshadowed by the potential of AI, which obviously is again like further widening the gap of existing inequalities in our societies. And obviously, like we see that AI targets the most marginalized people within our communities. So we really should be more critical and taking a step back and reflecting on these questions from a ethical perspective, but also from a human dignity perspective.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely, like you say, protecting those, protecting those communities as much as possible, due to kind of the historic and ongoing kind of inequalities that continue to exist.
Exactly, and in the end, it's an intersectional struggle that we're facing at the moment. So it's also like linked to climate change. It's also linked to problems within like other communities, queer communities, religious communities. So yeah, it's that's why a lot of people really that this is all interconnected with each other. But in the end, it really is an intersectional struggle that we're fighting for.
Absolutely. So a little bit of a change of direction. We've kind of talked a little bit about kind of rushing towards these kind of futures. And I suspect maybe a bit of that is kind of linked to these kind of myths that kind of surround AI and all the sort of prosperity and whatever that it is going to bring. What do you think are some of the biggest AI myths that you've kind of come across?
So I would say there are maybe two. The first one is that AI is more intelligent than humans. That doesn't make any sense because in the end, we are the one encoding these AIs and we are the one building these AI, and an AI will never reach this intelligence that is linked to a human being. And in the end, what does intelligence even mean? I mean, it's a subjective concept. And I think another myth that AI is not physical. When we talk about AI, we tend to think about this thing in the sky, the cloud, whilst people don't realize that it's actually like machine power, it's infrastructure, it's data centers. So AI has a lot of infrastructure, but I feel like it's demystified in the sense that people think that it's everywhere, but at the same time nowhere, which isn't the case.
It's like seeing those massive kind of data centers. It's a huge amount of physical resources that we just don't really see.
Exactly, yeah.
And kind of finally, well, semi-finally, kind of question. So you're kind of still studying at the moment, and covering all these kinds of things. So the question from the previous interviewee, Nicola Brandizzi, was asking about, would you kind of rather go into academia or industry?
So yeah, at the moment I somehow like work semi in the academia world as a researcher at the university. I'm not doing a PhD yet, and I have to say that I've been giving this a lot of thoughts. And at the moment, I think that there is more research needed within this field, especially when we're talking about ethical AI, responsible AI, but also other components that are connected with these terms, because it's, you know, when we talk about ethics or responsible, there are certain connotations, but it's such a broad field that I think, I mean, there's obviously a lot of research done, but more research can be done. But at the same time, I feel like within politics and within the political arena, that is the place where you can have impacts, because decisions are being decisions are being delegated to these people. They are the ones who are navigating our course and our directions. And I think eventually that would really want to work within that sphere, after having gained some knowledge and after maybe doing a PhD, to not only be that, you know, like political representative for the sake of being a political representative, but also having this baggage of research and understanding the things that I'm talking about to somehow try and steer society towards, a better world. Yeah, but it is something that I'm still giving a lot of thought, especially now with the masters that I'm still doing and this new research role that I'm working in. And at the moment, I'm really enjoying like all the literature and all the critical reflections. But I think that eventually I would want to move towards that arena.
Yeah. I kind of enjoy how it's like, often we see this kind of dichotomy of academia or industry, and actually, no, there's plenty of other
Oh,
things as
yeah.
well.
I mean, we need the experts there. That is the problem, that like experts aren't given a stage within that arena, because in the end, yeah, I mean, for what is research done then, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really sort of good point of like, yeah, for what purpose are we kind of doing research unless we can kind of
Exactly.
implement it in some way? And I guess, what would you like to ask the next interviewee in the series?
Mm, I'm really curious what their major implication is within this field, and especially when trying to convey the message of why responsible and ethical AI is important. I feel like that is something that I still struggle with, because a lot of people want to do AI, as I said, a lot of people want to jump on that train, but when it comes to ethics and the responsible part, it just like sticks to that checklist, and that's it. So I'm really curious how the next person tries to engage with these types of questions and tries to convey the message in such a way that it convinces the other party.
That's a great question. I'm really intrigued to see how they
Very
respond.
validated.
Yeah. And very finally, where can kind of people find out a little bit more about some of your work, some of the things you're working on?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter. And also recently, my friend and I, we started a platform called AI Better World, where we try to provide people with more knowledge about AI, especially to try and demystify AI to a certain extent. And we do that with video podcasts, and we also provide literature recommendations, documentaries, books, etc. So yeah, feel free to hit the like button. It's called AI Better World.
Brilliant. And like I say, we always have links to everything down below. So if you want to check any of that out, we will have that ready and waiting. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And finally, thank you for joining us today. If you would like to find out more about the series or anything mentioned here, do join us on AIhub.org. And until next time, goodbye for now.